Dr. Minho pressed his face against the transport ship's window as planet Zarian 7 came into view. The world looked like a giant marble covered in swirling grey and red clouds. After 3 months of space travel, he could barely contain his excitement. This wasn't just any dig site. This was humanity's first chance to work alongside alien archaeologists, and Minho had fought hard to lead the human team. "First time seeing an alien world?" asked Yuna, settling into the seat beside him. She was young for a xenoarchaeologist, barely 30, but her expertise in alien cultures had earned her a spot on this historic mission. Her dark eyes sparkled with the same excitement Minho felt. "First time being this far from Earth," Minho admitted. "You?" "Second alien world. For me," Yuna said, pulling up holographic displays of their destination. "But this one's special. The energy readings are off the charts." The ship shuddered as they entered Zarian 7's atmosphere. Through the red haze, Minho could see their alien teammates preparing their equipment. There was Kextil, a tall, crystalline being whose body looked like living glass. His species, the Veltari, were master builders who could sense structural weaknesses just by touch. Next to him stood Mordak, whose metallic exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's lights. The Takari were known throughout the galaxy as the best engineers money could buy. 3 other alien species completed their team. Each brought unique skills that had taken their civilizations thousands of years to develop. And here was humanity, barely a century into space travel, somehow invited to join this prestigious mission. The landing was rough. Zarian 7's surface was mostly volcanic rock and ash fields that stretched to the horizon. The air tasted metallic, even through their breathing masks. Minho stepped onto the alien soil and felt history beneath his boots. Somewhere under all this, ash lay secrets that could change everything humanity knew about the galaxy. "Energy readings are strongest over there," announced Dr. Veltar, pointing toward a series of low hills. The crystalline being's voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "My people's sensors detect something massive beneath the volcanic deposits." The team spent 2 days carefully excavating. Human hands worked alongside alien appendages, each species contributing their unique abilities. Minho found himself impressed by how well they worked together, despite speaking different languages and having completely different ways of thinking. On the 3rd day, Yuna's shovel struck something that wasn't rock. "Over here," she called out, "I found something." What emerged from beneath centuries of ash took everyone's breath away. Black stone walls rose from the ground like the ribs of some enormous buried creature. The material was unlike anything in their databases. It seemed to drink in light, making their scanner beams disappear into its surface without reflection. "This architecture," whispered Mordak, his mechanical voice filled with awe. "It predates anything in our historical records." As they cleared more ash, the true scope of their discovery became apparent. They hadn't found a building. They had found a temple complex larger than any human city. Corridors stretched deep underground, disappearing into darkness that their most powerful lights couldn't penetrate. The strangest part was the sound. Even though the corridors appeared empty, footsteps echoed from deep within the structure. Whispers seemed to drift up from the depths, speaking in no language any of their translation devices could recognize. "We're not the first ones here," Minho said quietly, staring into the temple's dark entrance. "The question is, who came before us? And where did they go?" The deeper they ventured into the temple, the more unsettling it became. Minho's flashlight beam seemed to get swallowed by the black walls, creating pockets of darkness that felt alive. Behind him, Yuna documented everything with her camera, but even the high-tech equipment struggled to capture clear images of the strange architecture. "The corridors are changing," whispered Yuna, checking her mapping device. "This passage wasn't here an hour ago." She was right. The temple seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at it. Doorways appeared where solid walls had been moments before. Hallways that led straight ahead suddenly curved to the left or right. It was as if the entire structure was breathing, rearranging itself around them. After 4 hours of careful exploration, they reached what could only be the temple's heart. The narrow corridor opened into a massive circular chamber that made everyone stop in their tracks. The ceiling soared high above them, disappearing into shadows that their lights couldn't reach. But it wasn't the size that took their breath away. In the center of the chamber stood a crystalline altar, perfectly clear like frozen water, and rising from its surface was the most beautiful sword any of them had ever seen. The blade gleamed silver-white, catching and reflecting their flashlight beams in ways that seemed impossible. It stood perfectly upright, as if someone had placed it there just moments ago. "By the void," breathed Veltar. "The crystalline aliens," body actually glowing brighter with excitement. "The energy readings are incredible." Minho approached slowly, his archaeologist's instincts telling him to be careful. The chamber walls were covered in symbols unlike anything in human databases. They weren't carved into the stone. Instead, they seemed to float just beneath the surface, pulsing with soft blue light that matched his heartbeat. "Yuna, are you getting this?" he called softly. "Camera's working, but the images look wrong," she replied, frowning at her display screen. "It's like the symbols are moving too fast for the equipment to capture properly." Jex, the team's mechanical expert, rolled forward on his tracked base. His species had replaced most of their biological parts with advanced machinery thousands of years ago, making them living computers. If anyone could analyze this mystery, it would be him. "Scanning now," Jex announced, multiple sensors emerging from his metallic body. Blue beams swept across the sword and altar. "Energy output is... This cannot be correct." "What are you reading?" asked Minho. "The weapon is generating more power than our ship's reactor, but that should be impossible. There are no visible power sources, no connections to external energy. According to my scans, the sword exists in our dimension, but draws power from somewhere else entirely." Veltar moved closer, his crystalline body resonating with harmonic frequencies that could detect structural flaws in solid matter. "The molecular composition makes no sense. My sensors read it as metallic, crystalline, organic, and energy-based all at the same time. It's as if the sword exists in multiple states of matter simultaneously." The other alien team members took turns with their scans. Each species brought technology that humanity could barely understand, devices that could analyze matter down to the quantum level. But every scan came back with impossible results. "It's like the sword doesn't want to be understood," muttered Kira, their youngest team member. She was barely 25, fresh out of the academy, but her intuition often proved more valuable than advanced equipment. As if responding to her words, the blue symbols on the walls pulsed brighter. The sword itself seemed to hum, a sound so low they felt it more than heard it. The chamber filled with an energy that made the hair on their arms stand up. "We should document everything before attempting any direct contact," suggested Minho, though something deep inside him wanted to reach out and touch the mysterious weapon. None of them realized that the sword had been waiting for exactly that. Impulse Hyun had always been fascinated by alien technology. As Earth's youngest engineering prodigy, he dreamed of seeing advanced alien machines in action. Now, watching the most sophisticated beings in the galaxy struggle with a simple sword, he began to question everything he thought he knew about technology. "We'll start with a basic gravitational field," announced Veltar, positioning a device that looked like a crystal flower around the sword. The Veltari had mastered gravity manipulation when humans were still discovering fire. This should lift the weapon without applying direct force. The device hummed to life, creating a shimmer in the air around the sword. Energy readings on. Hyun's tablet spiked immediately. For a moment, it seemed like the sword might actually move. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of rising, the sword sank deeper into the crystalline altar, as if the altar itself was becoming liquid. "Impossible," muttered Veltar, his crystalline body flickering with confused light patterns. "The gravitational field should have worked." "It's basic physics." Minho frowned, checking his own readings. "The sword's energy output just doubled. It's like it absorbed your attempt and used it to anchor itself more firmly." Next came Jex and his mechanical precision. The robot-like being extended multiple arms, each equipped with different tools. "Perhaps a more direct approach. My species has been extracting objects from solid matter for millennia." His tools whirred and buzzed, creating micro-vibrations designed to separate the sword from the altar at a molecular level. Sparks flew as his equipment made contact with the crystal surface, but instead of loosening the sword, the vibrations seemed to make the entire altar more solid. The sword didn't just sink deeper, it looked like it was becoming part of the altar itself. "Energy spike again," called out Yuna, monitoring their instruments. "Whatever we're doing, it's making the situation worse." The most impressive attempt came from Mordak's people, the Petroans. These rock-like beings were incredibly strong, capable of crushing steel with their bare hands. 3 of them positioned themselves around the altar, their granite-like bodies, glowing red with effort. "In our culture, sometimes the simplest solution is the best," rumbled Mordak, his voice like grinding stones. Pure physical force. They gripped the sword's handle together, their combined strength enough to lift a small building. Hyon watched his instruments in amazement as the energy readings went wild. The sword seemed to resist their pull with increasing force, as if it was actively fighting back. "Look at the altar," whispered Kira, pointing with a shaking finger. The crystalline surface was changing, flowing like thick liquid around the sword's base. With each second the Petroans pulled, the sword sank lower, until only the handle remained, visible above the crystal surface. "Stop!" shouted Minho. "You're making it worse." But the real shock came when they realized the temple itself was responding to their attempts. Passages they had used to enter the chamber were slowly sealing shut. New corridors appeared, leading in directions that defied the temple's original layout. The walls themselves seemed to be rearranging, creating a maze that trapped them near the altar. "The temple is protecting the sword," said Hyon, studying the architectural changes on his mapping device. "Every time we try to remove it, the entire structure adapts to prevent us from succeeding." Yuna noticed something else disturbing. The symbols on the walls are moving faster now, and they're brighter. It's like the temple is becoming more active with each failed attempt. As if to prove her point, a low humming filled the chamber. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. Emergency. Lights flickered on throughout the temple, revealing corridors that definitely hadn't been there before. "We're not just dealing with a weapon," realized Minho, staring at the nearly submerged sword. "We're dealing with some kind of intelligence. The temple and the sword are connected, and they don't want to be separated." Hyon looked around at the most advanced beings in the galaxy, all of them defeated by a simple sword embedded in crystal. Whatever civilization had built this place had technology that made their most sophisticated equipment look like stone tools. The question was no longer how to remove the sword. The question was whether they would be allowed to leave. While the alien experts huddled around their sophisticated equipment, arguing about quantum physics and dimensional theory, Sora sat quietly in the corner, sketching the symbols on the chamber walls. She had always been different from other archaeologists. While they relied on scanners and computers, she preferred to study things with her own eyes and hands. "The molecular structure suggests a trans-dimensional interface," Veltar was saying, his crystalline body glowing with intense thought. "Perhaps we need to approach this from a theoretical perspective." No, interrupted Jex, his mechanical voice growing frustrated. "This is clearly a technological problem. We need better equipment, more precise calibrations." Sora glanced up from her sketching. The aliens had been debating for 3 hours now, each convinced that their advanced methods were the key to solving the mystery, but something about their approach felt wrong to her. The more complicated they made it, the more the sword seemed to resist. She closed her sketchpad and stood up quietly. No one noticed as she walked toward the altar. The sword looked so ordinary now, almost like a museum piece, but there was something about it that called to her, something that had nothing to do with energy readings or molecular structures. "Maybe you just want someone to actually try," she whispered to the sword. The chamber had grown warmer over the past few hours. Sora could feel sweat on her forehead, despite the temple's cool air. She pulled off her gloves and tucked them into her belt. Her colleagues were still arguing, their voices echoing off the chamber walls. Without thinking too much about it, she reached out and wrapped her bare fingers around the sword's handle. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded. Through the chamber, not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming like sunrise. The walls, which had been solid black stone moments before, became transparent as glass. Through them, Sora could see vast chambers stretching in every direction, filled with strange machines and floating platforms that glowed with soft blue light. "Sora!" shouted Minho, but his voice sounded distant and muffled. The sword came free from the altar as easily as pulling a flower from soft earth. It felt perfect in her hands, balanced and warm, as if it had been made specifically for her grip. But that wasn't the most amazing part. Images flooded her mind, not painful or confusing, but clear and beautiful like watching a movie. She saw the sword's creators, tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered like starlight. They moved through cities that floated among the clouds, their technology so advanced it looked like magic. But they were dying out. Their race was old, older than the mountains on Earth, and their time was ending. She watched as they gathered in great councils, debating what to do with their vast knowledge and incredible technology. They couldn't take it with them, but they couldn't let it disappear either, so they hid it. On worlds scattered across the galaxy, they built temples like this one. Each temple contained a piece of their legacy, waiting for someone worthy to claim it. But the key wasn't advanced technology or superior intelligence. The key was trust, the simple willingness to reach out with bare hands and make direct contact. "They were waiting for us," Sora said aloud, though she wasn't sure if anyone could hear her. Not humans specifically, but someone who would approach with openness instead of suspicion, someone who would touch instead of scan. The visions showed her more. The sword wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to understanding everything the ancients had learned about the universe. With it, she could access their libraries, their star, maps, their knowledge of worlds beyond imagination. Around her, the temple continued to transform. Hidden doorways opened, revealing corridors lined with glowing crystals. Ancient machines hummed to life, their purposes mysterious but somehow familiar. The chamber itself expanded, its walls stretching upward until they could see a sky full of stars through the transparent ceiling. Her alien colleagues stood frozen in amazement, their advanced equipment useless in the face of something their civilizations had never considered. Sometimes the most sophisticated problems had the simplest solutions. Sometimes you just had to be willing to reach out and touch the unknown. Jinwoo had been documenting everything with his camera when Sora lifted the sword. The moment she made contact, something incredible happened to him too. As the temple transformed around them, waves of foreign memories began flooding his mind. At first, he thought he was having some kind of reaction to the strange energies filling the chamber. But these weren't his memories. They belonged to someone else entirely. He saw vast cities floating in space, connected by bridges of pure light. Beings with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to glow from within moved gracefully through gardens. That defied gravity. Their technology was so advanced it looked like art, with machines that responded to thought rather than touch. "Jinwoo, are you okay?" Minho's voice sounded far away, even though he was standing right beside him. "I can see them," Jinwoo whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "The ones who built this place. They called themselves the Waymakers." The memories came faster now, like pages turning in a cosmic history book. The Waymakers had been the first civilization to travel between stars, long before any other species had even discovered fire. They had explored the galaxy for millions of years, cataloging worlds and watching younger races evolve from primitive tribes into space-faring civilizations. But they had a problem. Despite all their knowledge and technology, they were slowly dying out. Not from war or disease, but from something far more tragic. They had grown too perfect, too advanced. They no longer felt wonder or curiosity. They had learned everything there was to learn, seen everything there was to see. They were lonely, Jinwoo said, tears streaming down his face as the alien emotions filled his heart. They had all this incredible knowledge, but no one to share it with. Through the sword's connection, he experienced their final years. The Waymakers had spent centuries observing younger races, searching for species that might one day be worthy inheritors of their legacy. They watched civilizations rise and fall, each one brilliant in its own way, but lacking something essential. Most races, when they developed advanced technology, became dependent on it. They used machines to think for them, tools to experience the world for them. They lost the ability to make direct contact with the universe around them. Everything had to be filtered through scanners, sensors, and artificial interfaces. But then, the Waymakers found Earth. Humans were different. Even as they developed incredible technology, they still insisted on touching things with their own hands. They still trusted their instincts over their instruments. They still reached out to make direct contact with the unknown, even when it might be dangerous. They watched us for thousands of years, Jinwoo explained to his amazed colleagues. Even when we were still living in caves, they could see what we would become. They saw that we would never stop reaching out, never stop making contact. The memories showed him the Waymaker's final project. Across thousands of worlds, they built temples like this one. Each temple contained a fragment of their vast knowledge, locked away behind tests that only the right kind of species could pass. The swords weren't weapons at all, they were keys, designed to respond only to beings willing to make direct, unfiltered contact. Most species try to understand things before they touch them, Jinwoo continued, watching his alien teammates with new understanding. But humans touch things to understand them. That's what made us special to the Waymakers. He saw their final days as the last Waymakers gathered to watch their temple network activate across the galaxy. They knew they would never see who would eventually claim their inheritance, but they were satisfied knowing that somewhere in the future, beings like humans would carry their knowledge forward. The most amazing part was the scope of their gift. The temples weren't just on dead worlds like Zerion 7. They were hidden on inhabited planets, in the depths of gas giants, even in the hearts of stars. Each one contained different aspects of Waymaker knowledge: medicine that could heal any disease, technology that could terraform dead worlds, star maps leading to dimensions beyond imagination. There are thousands of these temples, Jinwoo said, his voice filled with awe. And now that Sora has activated the first one, the others will start calling to us. The Waymakers left us the keys to the entire galaxy. But along with the wonderful visions came a warning. Other species had been searching for these temples for millennia. Some wanted to protect the knowledge. Others wanted to destroy it, fearing what humans might become with such power. The real adventure was just beginning. Nari had always been good with communications equipment, but she'd never seen anything like what was happening to their systems. Now, the moment Sora lifted the sword, every piece of electronic equipment in the temple went crazy. Her communication array lit up like a Christmas tree, receiving signals from places so far away that the light from their stars hadn't even reached Earth yet. "Guys, we have a problem," she called out, her voice tight with concern. The signal from the sword just broadcasted across the entire galaxy. Every major civilization out there knows what just happened. The first responses came from the nearby systems. Species that humanity had barely made contact with were suddenly sending urgent messages. Nari's translation software worked overtime, converting alien languages into readable text on her screens. "The Zephyrian Council is congratulating us," she said, confusion clear in her voice. "They're calling this a momentous awakening and want to establish formal diplomatic relations immediately." But not all the messages were friendly. "The hegemony of Kalar is demanding we surrender the artifact immediately," Nari continued, her face growing pale as more translations appeared. "They're claiming it belongs to their ancient heritage, even though we found it on an uninhabited world." Minho moved to look over her shoulder at the flood of incoming communications. "How many civilizations are responding?" "Hundreds," Nari replied, her fingers flying over the controls as she tried to organize the chaos. "Maybe thousands. It's like every species in the galaxy was waiting for this moment." The most interesting responses came from civilizations humanity had never even heard of. Ancient species that rarely communicated with younger races were breaking their silence to send messages of either welcome or warning. "The Elder Consortium is..." "Wow, they're offering to share their star charts with us," Nari said, her eyes widening. "Do you know how valuable that would be? They've been mapping the galaxy for millions of years, but for every message of friendship, there were two of hostility. Species that had built their power on controlling rare technologies were suddenly facing the possibility that humans might have access to something far beyond their capabilities. The Dominion of Zerth is mobilizing their battle fleets, Nari reported, her voice growing more worried. They're saying humans are too primitive to handle Waymaker technology safely. Through her equipment, she could monitor military communications across dozens of star systems. What she saw made her stomach turn. Fleets that had been patrolling peacefully were suddenly changing course, all heading toward human space. It's not just one or two hostile governments, she explained to the team. There's a whole alliance of species that have been trying to find these temples for thousands of years. They're calling themselves the Preservation Coalition, and they believe the Waymaker artifacts should be locked away forever. The scariest part was how quickly everything was happening. The sword signal had reached across the galaxy in minutes, and already political alliances that had been stable for centuries were falling apart. Species were choosing sides based on their attitude toward humanity's new role as inheritors of ancient technology. Earth's government is trying to contact us, Nari said, adjusting her long-range communicator, but there's so much interference from all these alien signals that I can barely get through. What she could hear wasn't encouraging. Earth's defense forces were going to full alert as unknown ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. Some came in peace, offering protection and alliance. Others came with weapons powered and shields raised. The collective of minds is offering to shelter human colonies, Nari reported. But the Stellar Empire is demanding we hand over all humans with access to Waymaker technology. Through it all, more temples were activating. Her equipment picked up similar energy signatures from dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Each activation sent out its own signal, creating a network of ancient sites, all calling to each other across the void. There are humans on some of those worlds, she realized, with growing excitement. Archaeological teams, colony ships, even some tourists, they're all reporting the same thing we experienced here. But that also meant humanity was suddenly scattered across a galaxy that was rapidly choosing sides. Some humans would find themselves protected by friendly aliens. Others might face capture or worse from species that viewed them as a threat. How long do we have before the hostile fleets reach human space? Asked Minho. Nari checked her calculations, her face grim. The fastest ships will reach Earth's outer colonies in 3 days. The main fleets will arrive in 2 weeks. The age of humanity, hiding quietly in their corner of the galaxy, was over. Whether they were ready or not, they were about to become players in a cosmic game that had been waiting millions of years to begin. Wu Bin had always been the team's data analyst, the quiet one who spent hours studying star charts and navigation systems. But as the temple's ancient computers came online, he found himself connected to information networks that made human technology look like children's toys. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at the holographic display that had materialized in front of him. "According to these records, Earth doesn't exist." The others gathered around as Wu Bin manipulated the 3-dimensional star map floating in the air. It showed their local region of the galaxy in perfect detail, with every star system, every planet, every asteroid belt marked with incredible precision, except for one glaring omission. "Where's our solar system?" asked Yuna, pointing to empty space where Earth should be. "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Wu Bin replied, his fingers dancing through holographic controls that somehow responded to his thoughts. "According to every galactic database I can access, there's nothing in that region of space. No stars, no planets, nothing. But the Waymaker records told a different story." As Wu Bin dug deeper into their files, he discovered the truth that made his hands shake with excitement and fear. "They hid us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Waymakers deliberately concealed Earth's location from every other civilization in the galaxy. The technology was staggering in its sophistication. The Waymakers had surrounded Earth's solar system with a field that bent light and gravity, making it effectively invisible to any outside observer. To alien astronomers, that region of space appeared completely empty. Trade routes avoided it automatically. Exploration fleets found reasons to go elsewhere. "But why hide us?" asked Minho. "If they wanted us to inherit their technology, why keep us secret?" Wu Bin accessed more files and the answer became clear. Protection. They knew that if other species discovered humanity too early, we'd either be enslaved or destroyed. We needed time to develop naturally, to maintain our unique approach to understanding the universe. As Sora held the sword, Wubin could see that it was changing her. Her reflexes were faster, her thinking clearer. When she moved, it was with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. The sword wasn't just a key to Waymaker knowledge. It was enhancing her capabilities, preparing her for challenges that lay ahead. There are 15 more temples, Wubin announced, studying the data flowing through the ancient systems. Each one contains different aspects of Waymaker technology: medicine, engineering, space travel, even technologies we don't have words for yet. But the locations of these temples made his blood run cold. They weren't hidden on safe, uninhabited worlds like Zerion 7. The Waymakers had placed them in the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. One temple sat in the heart of a black hole system. Another was buried beneath the ice of a planet where the atmosphere was pure acid. A third floated in a dimension that existed parallel to normal space. They're tests, he realized. Each temple is more dangerous than the last. The Waymakers wanted to make sure that only truly worthy beings could claim their full inheritance. As if responding to his discovery, ancient systems across the galaxy began awakening. Wubin's screens filled with activation signals from defensive platforms that had been dormant for millions of years. Massive space stations hidden in asteroid fields came online. Weapon systems built into planets themselves started their startup. Sequences. "What's happening?" asked Nari, watching her communication equipment detect energy signatures from across the galaxy. "The Waymaker defense network is activating," Wubin explained, his voice filled with awe. "It's recognizing humans as the new operators. We're being given access to military technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But with great power came great responsibility. The defensive systems weren't just protecting human worlds. They were positioned to guard the remaining temples, ensuring that only humans could reach them. Any alien force that tried to claim Waymaker technology would face automated defenses that had been waiting millions of years to fulfill their purpose." "Look at this," Wubin said, highlighting a section of the star map. "There's a massive fortress, hidden in the Centauri Nebula. It's been cloaked for so long that no one even knows it exists, but now it's coming online, and it's broadcasting human identification codes." The implications were staggering. Humanity had gone from being a minor species barely known beyond their own solar system to inheriting the most advanced military network in galactic history. But they were also inheriting the enemies that came with such power. "The other civilizations won't just let us claim all this technology," warned Minho. "They'll see us as a threat." "They already do," replied Wubin, monitoring the hostile fleets converging on human space. "But now we have the tools to defend ourselves. The question is whether we're wise enough to use them properly." As more systems came online, one thing became clear. The Waymakers hadn't just left humanity a gift. They'd left them a test that would determine the future of the entire galaxy. Daeun had joined the expedition as a backup communications officer, never expecting to become humanity's first interstellar coordinator. But as more temples activated across the galaxy, she found herself at the center of something that would have seemed impossible just days ago. "I'm getting signals from other human teams," she announced, her voice filled with excitement and disbelief. "There are archaeological expeditions on 12 different worlds, and they're all reporting the same thing we experienced here." Through the sword's connection to the ancient network, Daeun could communicate instantly with humans, scattered across thousands of light years. Dr. Kang's team on Proxima Tertius had discovered a temple filled with medical technology that could regrow lost limbs. Professor Lee's expedition to the Vega system found engineering blueprints for ships that could travel between galaxies. "It's like a cosmic treasure hunt," Daeun explained to her amazed colleagues. "Each temple specializes in different knowledge, but they're all connected through this network." But the wonder of discovery was quickly overshadowed by alarming news from the outer colonies. The first attacks had begun. "Colony ships near the Tau Ceti system are under assault," Daeun reported, her face pale as emergency signals flooded her communication array. The hegemony of Kethmore launched surprise attacks on 3 human settlements. They're demanding surrender of all personnel with access to Waymaker technology. The Kethmore were a militaristic species that had built their empire through conquest. and intimidation. For centuries they had been searching for Waymaker artifacts, believing that such technology would make them the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. The idea that primitive humans might claim this inheritance was unacceptable to them. "How bad is it?" asked Minho, reading the grim expression on Dayun's face. "New Terra colony has gone silent. Last transmission reported Kethmore warships in orbit, demanding evacuation of all human inhabitants." Dayun's hands shook as she processed more incoming signals. But here's the strange part. The colonists aren't defenseless anymore. Through her connection to the network, Dayun could see what was happening across human space. As Waymaker defense systems came online, human settlements that had never possessed military technology suddenly found themselves protected by weapons that defied understanding. "The orbital defense platform at Kepler Colony just activated," she reported with growing amazement. "It's been disguised as an asteroid for millions of years, but now it's protecting the human settlers. The Kethmore fleet can't even get close." Even more incredible was the discovery that humans didn't need to be physically present at temples to access Waymaker technology. As more people made contact with activated artifacts, they developed the ability to interface with the ancient network through thought alone. "I can talk to them," whispered Dr. Park, a young archaeologist working on Gliese 581G. His voice came through clearly despite being over 20 light-years away. "The sword-bearer here just made contact, and now we can all communicate through the network." Dayun found herself coordinating a resistance that spanned the galaxy. Human teams were sharing information instantly, warning each other of approaching threats and coordinating the activation of Waymaker defenses. "The temple on Kepler 442b contains shipbuilding technology," reported Captain Kim from the edge of human space. "We're already starting construction of vessels based on Waymaker designs. They'll be ready for testing in days, not years, but the enemy response was escalating just as quickly. The Preservation Coalition, led by the Kethmore, had convinced dozens of species that humanity posed an existential threat to galactic stability. Their combined fleets represented the largest military force assembled in recorded history. "They're not just attacking our colonies anymore," Dayun observed, monitoring enemy communications. "They're trying to reach the remaining temples first. If they can't claim the technology, they want to destroy it." The race was on. Human teams were desperately trying to reach the 15 remaining temples before hostile aliens could destroy them. Each successful activation strengthened the Waymaker network and gave humanity access to new capabilities. But each failure meant losing irreplaceable knowledge forever. Dr. Choi's team on Wolf 359 just activated their temple, Dayun announced. They found defensive technologies that can shield entire planets, but the Dominion of Zerth is only 6 hours away from the temple on Ross 128. Through her connection to the network, Dayun could feel the presence of other sword-bearers across the galaxy. They shared not just information, but emotions and experiences. When one team faced danger, they all felt it. When another made a breakthrough, they all shared in the discovery. "We're not just archaeologists anymore," she realized, looking around at her transformed colleagues. "We're guardians of something ancient and powerful, and there are forces out there that will do anything to stop us from claiming our inheritance." The hunt for the remaining temples had begun, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Sunho had always been the team's historian, more comfortable with ancient texts than modern technology. But now, standing in the temple's transformed command center, he felt more connected to the universe than he ever thought possible. The sword that Sora had first lifted was no longer just a weapon in his hands. It had become part of him, flowing like liquid metal along his arm and integrating with his nervous system. "The final wave is approaching," he announced, his voice carrying new authority as information flowed directly into his mind from sensors scattered across the star system. 67 ships from the Preservation Coalition. They'll reach Xerion 7 in 4 hours. The temple around him had completed its transformation into something that defied description. Walls of living crystal displayed real-time information from across the galaxy. Floors that had once been solid stone now flowed like water, reshaping themselves to accommodate the needs of their human operators. The air itself seemed alive, responding to their thoughts and emotions. "Can we defend against that many ships?" asked Yuna, though she already suspected the answer. Sunho smiled, feeling the confidence that came from having access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge. The Waymakers didn't just leave us temples, they left us an entire civilization's worth of defensive capabilities. Through his connection to the network, he could see the approaching enemy fleet in perfect detail. The coalition ships were impressive by current galactic standards, armed with weapons that could shatter moons and protected by shields that had never been penetrated. But they were still using technology that the Waymakers had surpassed before Earth's sun had finished forming. "Activating orbital defenses," Sunho said, his consciousness reaching out to touch systems that had waited eons for this moment. Around Zerion 7, space itself began to change. What had appeared to be empty void revealed hidden structures as cloaking, fields deactivated. Massive defense platforms, each one larger than a city, materialized in perfect defensive formations. Weapons that drew power directly from the planet's core came online, their energy signatures so intense that the approaching ship's sensors couldn't properly analyze them. But the most incredible change was happening to the human team members themselves. Each person who had made contact with Waymaker technology was evolving, developing capabilities that bridged the gap between biological and technological existence. "I can feel them," said Minho, his eyes closed in concentration. "Every human who's activated a temple. We're all connected now, sharing knowledge and experience across impossible distances." The network had grown to include 43 activated sites, each one operated by human teams who had discovered they were natural interfaces for Waymaker technology. Dr. Song on Kepler 438b was coordinating the construction of ships that could travel through folded space. Professor Lim on HD 4307G had activated manufacturing systems that could build entire cities in days. "The Coalition doesn't understand what they're facing," Sunho observed, watching the enemy fleet maintain its course despite clear evidence of the defensive systems now surrounding Zerion 7. "They think this is about controlling ancient weapons. They don't realize it's about choosing the future of galactic civilization." As the enemy ships entered weapons range, Sunho made a choice that would echo across history. Instead of destroying the Coalition fleet, he opened a communication channel to every ship in their formation. "This is Sunho Kim speaking for humanity and the Waymaker inheritance," he broadcast, his voice carrying the authority of ancient civilizations. "You see us as a threat because we've gained access to technology you've sought for millennia. But the Waymakers didn't choose us because we were the strongest or the smartest. They chose us because we're willing to share." Through the temple's systems, he transmitted a portion of Waymaker medical knowledge directly to the Coalition ships. Cures for diseases that had plagued their species for generations, healing technologies that could extend life and eliminate suffering. "This is what we offer," Sunho continued. "Not conquest or domination, but partnership." The Waymakers left enough knowledge to transform the entire galaxy, to end scarcity and conflict forever. But only if we work together. The response was immediate and divided. Some ships in the Coalition fleet powered down their weapons, their crews overwhelmed by the implications of what they'd been offered. Others, particularly the Kethmore vessels, increased power to their weapons systems, determined to destroy what they couldn't control. "The old guard won't accept change," Sunho realized, feeling sadness rather than anger. "They've built their power on scarcity and conflict. A galaxy of abundance threatens everything they are." As the first shots were fired, Sunho activated defenses that had never been tested in actual combat. Energy beams that could slice through dimensional barriers met Coalition weapons in displays of light visible from neighboring star systems. But this wasn't really a battle between ships and stations. It was a battle between two visions of the future, one where knowledge was hoarded by the powerful and another where it was shared freely among all sentient beings. Standing in the temple's command center, surrounded by technology that could reshape reality itself, Sunho understood that humanity's role as archaeologists had ended. They were no longer uncovering the past. They were building the future.